"You're too sensitive," she tossed out after kissing another guy as a joke at the party. That was the moment I stopped reacting to anything she did. Now, she's been fired, her friends are gone, and my absolute silence is the only thing she has left to face. Hey viewers, before we dive completely into the story, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like if you enjoy stories about karma and quiet revenge. It really helps the channel. Thanks for the support. The heavy bass from the speakers was an annoying, off-kilter thumping against my ribs. I tried to look relaxed, leaning against the wall, nursing a warm, flat beer in a red Solo cup. Chloe's world was always like this, loud, blindingly bright, and constantly spinning. For 3 years, I'd been her rock, the steady anchor in her personal storm, the person who remembered the grocery list and fixed her broken electronics. But in crowded rooms like this, I always felt like an accessory, easily overlooked. Across the living room, Chloe was absolutely glowing as she held court. Her laugh was a sharp, crystalline sound that easily cut through the music as she launched into some animated story, her hands flying for emphasis. Standing a little too close was Derek, the just a friend from her office. He was everything I wasn't. Boisterous, totally at ease, and wearing a tight shirt that perfectly framed his gym-sculpted body. He hung on her every word with a smirk that implied they shared a deep, secret joke. See? He gets it. Chloe had told me more than once. He doesn't overthink everything. He just lives. I took another tasteless sip of the cheap beer. I was definitely overthinking now. I watched how his hand rested on her arm for a beat too long, and how she threw her head back, offering her exposed throat to his whispered joke. It was a familiar, sickening feeling in my gut, one I'd spent years rationalizing as just my own insecurity. "Don't be so sensitive, Mark." I pushed off the wall and headed for the kitchen, desperate for a few seconds of peace. I poured the rest of the bad beer down the sink, the meager suds fizzing into a depressing final foam. As I reached for a glass of water, a sudden surge of whistles and shouting erupted from the living room. My stomach immediately dropped. I walked back to the doorway and stopped dead. The party guests had formed a semicircle. In the center, beneath the spinning disco ball, Chloe and Derek were locked in a fervent, dramatic kiss. This wasn't a quick peck or a playful brush. It was a full contact, hands in hair, completely absorbed moment that seemed to last an age. The cheering of her friends became the terrible soundtrack to my quiet, internal breakdown. Then, someone spotted me. The cheering quickly faltered, then died out, leaving only the relentless music. The circle awkwardly split open. Chloe pulled away from the kiss, her face flushed and bright. She caught my eyes for one agonizing second. There was a raw, undeniable flash of something real in her expression, guilt, maybe panic. But then it was gone, replaced by a nervous, exaggerated laugh. "Oh my God, Mark, your face," she giggled, waving her hand in dismissal. "It was a dare. We lost a bet. Just lighten up." Derek slid his arm possessively around her shoulders, wearing a disgustingly smug grin. "Yeah man, don't be so sensitive. It was just a bit of fun." Their words hung in the air, toxic and all too familiar. Every single eye in the room was fixed on me, waiting for the expected performance. The hurt, jealous boyfriend, the easy punchline. I refused to give it to them. My voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the beat of the music, yet it cut through the silence with chilling clarity. "I'm not laughing." Chloe's smirk instantly disappeared. Her eyes, moments ago sparkling with laughter, now hardened into chips of ice. She stepped away from Derek, focusing her entire, hostile attention on me. "You never do," she said, her voice dripping with pure disdain. "That is the fundamental problem. You are always so serious. You're too sensitive. You're ruining the atmosphere and embarrassing me." There it was. The ultimate betrayal. My feelings, my perfectly valid human response to watching my girlfriend humiliate me in public, were framed as the actual transgression. I was the embarrassment. I was the mood killer. I stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The girl I had loved, the one I had planned a future with, stood there, telling me I was flawed because I possessed a heart that functioned normally. In that precise moment, something inside me didn't shatter. It simply and permanently shut down. I didn't say another word. I turned my back on her, on Derek, and on the whole staring crowd. I walked to the coat closet, retrieved my jacket with hands that were eerily steady, put it on, and left through the front door into the cool, quiet night. The sudden silence was a gift. The drive home was conducted in a kind of emotional vacuum. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't scream or cry. I just drove, my mind terrifyingly, perfectly blank. Hours later, I was sitting on our living room couch in the pitch black when she finally arrived. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting skeletal shadows across the floor. I heard her key fumble in the lock, and her steps were clumsy as she kicked off her high heels. "Mark," she called out, her voice slightly slurred by alcohol. Are you sulking in the dark like a vampire now? She hit the light switch, blinking in the sudden glare. She was still riding the party high, defensive, and clearly braced for a major confrontation. She expected tears and yelling. She was completely prepared to win a fight about my fragility. I just sat there, looking at her. Are you honestly still focused on this? She sighed, tossing her purse onto the floor. It was completely meaningless. You are blowing this so far out of proportion, it's genuinely insane. I remained perfectly silent, my hands resting calmly on my knees. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, she yelled, throwing her hands up. The silent treatment? It's pathetic and childish. You're so insecure. I can't live in a world where I have to walk on eggshells around my own friends. Derek is just fun. He doesn't overanalyze everything like you do. I finally spoke, my voice devoid of all feeling, perfectly level. Was the tongue part of the bet, too? She gaped at me, my composure completely disrupting her prepared script. What is that supposed to mean? What do you want me to do, Mark? Beg. It was a joke. You're right, I said. A triumphant, briefly vindicated look flashed across her face. Finally, you see. You shouldn't have to walk on eggshells, I continued, smoothly cutting her off. And I shouldn't have to explain why watching my girlfriend kiss another man is hurtful. This isn't up for debate. My feelings are not negotiable. The brief triumph on her face soured into confusion, then fierce frustration. So what? You're dumping me over one stupid joke? You really are that fragile? I didn't dignify the question with a response. I stood up, and for a fleeting instant, I saw a real, honest fear flash in her eyes. She must have thought I was finally going to snap and start screaming. Instead, I simply walked past her, down the hall to the spare bedroom, and closed the door. The soft, quiet click of the latch was louder, more final, than any shout. The conversation, the relationship, it was all over. Inside the room, my composure held. I didn't cry or rage. I took out my phone and let my thumb hover over her contact. Every delicate, sensitive nerve she had mocked was screaming at me to text her, to beg for an explanation, to try and make her finally understand the excruciating pain. My fingers shook as I began typing a heartbroken paragraph. How could you? I love you. Was it all a lie? The words were a torrent of hot, messy emotion. Then I stopped and read them. I saw the desperate, pleading man in those words. The exact man she would dismiss as too sensitive. I took a deep, steadying breath and deleted the entire message. Every single word. I watched the cursor blink on a completely blank screen. That was the first, true victory. The next morning, I packed with a deliberate, surgical silence that seemed to bother Chloe more than any yelling could have. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, arms crossed, her expression a toxic mix of anger and confusion. You are honestly leaving over this? She repeated, still unable to comprehend it. You're going to throw away 3 years because you can't handle a joke? I never looked at her. I folded a sweater, placed it in the open suitcase, and reached for another. The mechanical rhythm of the task, fold, place, reach, was a kind of meditation. It kept the swirling void at bay. You are being completely ridiculous, she insisted, her voice growing shrill. You need to just move on. I finally zipped the suitcase closed and stood up. I looked at her then, and I saw a genuine flicker of panic when she registered the utter emptiness in my eyes. There was no pain, no love, no conflict. Just pure, absolute zero. The lease is in your name, I said, my voice as sterile and factual as an insurance report. I've paid my portion through the end of the month. My lawyer will contact you about the few shared assets. I rolled the suitcase past her. I didn't look back or offer a goodbye. I drove to my friend Leo's apartment, where he had already prepared the couch for me without asking a single question. I blocked Chloe's number. I deleted her from every social media platform. I became a ghost. The initial week was the most difficult. The silence I had built around myself started to feel suffocating. One evening at Leo's sink, I was washing a mug she'd given me as a joke. World's okayest boyfriend. A warm memory attacked me. Her laughing as she gave it to me feigning offense, followed by her kissing me and whispering, I'm kidding, you're the best. The memory was so vivid it landed like a physical punch. A single hot tear escaped and slid down my cheek, vanishing into the soapy water. I immediately wiped my face with my sleeve, my jaw clenched. This was the sensitivity she had mocked. This was the part of me that, they said, had to die, but I didn't want it to die. I just needed to transform it. I thought about the old woodworking tools collecting dust in my parents' garage. It had been my favorite hobby in high school, one Chloe had consistently belittled. It's so slow, she'd once complained, watching me fix a chair. And messy. All that dust. Don't you have something better to do? Now I didn't. I rented a small, sunlit space in a nearby industrial complex, a workshop. The first time I stepped inside, the potent scent of fresh pine and sawdust was instantly healing. I bought a rough, imposing slab of walnut, its grain a chaotic, beautiful map. I started with hand tools, the rhythmic scrape of the plane, the gentle tap-tap-tap of the chisel. There was no space for overthinking here. The wood demanded patience and utter respect. My hands, which had felt so useless holding that beer cup, were now tools of creation. Sawdust settled on my arms and mixed with my sweat. It was a productive, purposeful mess. For hours, the only sounds were the whisper of the sander and the deep focus of my own breathing. The swirling, anxious thoughts in my head began to smooth out, mirroring the polished surface of the wood. I wasn't just building a coffee table. I was building a new foundation for myself, piece by piece, sanding away the soft, wounded parts until something resilient and beautiful emerged. Meanwhile, in my calculated absence, Chloe's world began to completely unravel. At work, she was still reeling from my silent departure and became reckless. She desperately tried to recover the intoxicating high she'd lost, trying to prove to Derek and her few remaining friends that she was still the fun, vibrant star of the show. They were preparing a pitch for the Anderson account, a huge contract with a very traditional, old-money family business. It was the kind of client that could make or break a career. I knew all about it because she had complained nonstop for weeks. "They're so stuffy, Mark," she'd moaned. "The son taking over is a total dinosaur. Zero vision. You have to treat them like fragile babies." I told her then treat them like fragile babies. Don't try to force your revolutionary ideas on them. Just listen. She'd just rolled her eyes. Don't be so sensitive. It's just corporate games. Now, in a crowded after-work bar, trying to show off for Derek and a few colleagues, she let her guard fall. Flushed with cocktails and her desperate need for attention, she started spilling secrets. "The Anderson presentation is locked in," she boasted, leaning close to Derek. "The old man is senile, and the son is a total pushover. We're going to pitch the rebel campaign. They'll hate it, but we'll strong-arm them into it. They basically have no alternative. We hold all the data." She then revealed a highly confidential pricing model and a perceived weakness in the Anderson family's internal dynamics, information they planned to exploit. This was not just unprofessional, it was dangerously unethical. She waved off a junior colleague's worried look. "Relax. It's just industry gossip. Don't be so sensitive." Derek, who only ever saw life as a trivial game, casually repeated the most damaging details to a friend who worked at a rival firm, bragging about his girlfriend's inside scoop. The leak was traced directly back to Chloe within days. The Anderson family, famous for its rigid integrity, was furious. They immediately and publicly withdrew their multi-million-dollar account, issuing a scathing press release about the firm's unethical culture and profound lack of discretion. Chloe was called into a partner's office and fired immediately for gross misconduct and breach of confidentiality. She was escorted out of the building, her career completely destroyed. The social dominoes fell next. Her friend Stacy, who had been at the fateful party, finally saw the entire toxic picture clearly. She met Chloe for what would be their final meeting. "You called Mark sensitive for being hurt because you kissed Derek," Stacy said, her voice cold with disgust. "And now you're fired for that exact same reckless, drama-loving behavior. We're all too sensitive to be around this train wreck. Don't ever call us again." The friend group, built on such a flimsy foundation of fun, dissolved instantly. Chloe was utterly, completely alone. The ultimate blow came from Derek himself. With Chloe now jobless, emotionally volatile, and a social outcast, he lost all interest overnight. When she showed up at his apartment, sobbing, he didn't even bother to invite her inside. He just stood in the doorway, looking annoyed. "Look, Chloe, this was fun for a while," he said, checking his phone. "But it's just gotten way too dramatic. You're a lot of drama, you know that." She wept. "You were part of this, you." He gave her a final, dismissive smirk, a perfect echo of her own from the party. "It was just a bit of fun. Don't be so sensitive about it." He shut the door in her face. The echo of her own weaponized words was the final, killing stroke. She was now unemployed, friendless, and thoroughly discarded, left standing in the hollow silence of the consequences she had so carelessly created. The deep silence I had carefully cultivated around myself became my impenetrable fortress. I devoted myself to my work, my woodworking, and the quiet, dependable rhythm of my new life. The walnut coffee table was complete, a stunning, live-edge piece, polished to a deep, warm luster. It was solid. It was real. It would never manipulate me or call me names. Then, the first small breach in the walls appeared. A text from an unknown number, but I knew immediately it was her. Unknown number, 11:34 p.m. "Mark, I know you probably hate me, but I lost my job. The Anderson account. Everything is falling apart. I miss you." I read the words. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just the mild interest of a news headline about a stranger far away. I dismissed the notification. The next day, a voicemail. Her voice was choked with tears and slightly slurred by despair. Voicemail, please, just talk to me. I made a huge mistake. Derek was a total loser. You were right about everything. I finally see that. I'm so sorry. It's such a mess. Please. I deleted it without listening to the end. A week later, another text arrived. Unknown number. My mom said she saw you at the grocery store. You look really good. I can't stop crying. I need my best friend. The sheer audacity of that final phrase, my best friend, after she had publicly shredded me, almost managed to spark a reaction. Almost. I inhaled deeply and focused my mind on the smooth, unyielding grain of the walnut. I left the message unread. Then her flying monkey arrived. Stacy, her former primary enabler. Stacy, hey Mark. I know what she did was messed up, but she's genuinely suffering. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive her? She's learned her lesson. This time, I finally responded. It was the only reply any of them would ever get. I typed one single, crystal clear sentence. Me. Do not contact me again. The brief quiet that followed was the calm before the storm. The real Chloe, the one hiding beneath the performative tears, finally erupted. The text arrived in a furious, rapid volley. Unknown number. Fine, I get it. Unknown number. You're just a cold, heartless bastard. Unknown number. You're happy about this, aren't you? You're enjoying watching me suffer. Unknown number. You're only using this as an excuse because you're too weak to handle a real woman with a personality. There they were, her true colors, blazing in perfect, furious high definition. She wasn't sorry for her actions. She was only sorry that she was facing consequences. I wasn't a person to her. I was just an audience for her continuous performance. And I had committed the unforgivable sin of walking out of the theater. I screenshotted the messages, saved them in a folder labeled closure, and blocked the number. The fortress walls were now solid steel. The invitation to Leo's gallery opening was a welcome distraction. It was a small, elegant affair for a local sculptor he represented. The air was clean, faintly smelling of white wine and stone dust, a world away from sticky floors and cheap beer. I stood with Sarah, the landscape architect I had been seeing for a few months. We had met in a park where I was sketching furniture concepts, and she was surveying the land for a new project. She was observant, quiet, and possessed a deep, steady calm in her eyes. She was admiring a bronze sculpture, her finger gently tracing the line of its form in the air. It's the artist's sensitivity to the material that I love, she was saying. He's not trying to force it. He's collaborating with it. I smiled, a genuine, easy smile. I know exactly what you mean. And then I felt it. A palpable shift in the air, a toxic, low-grade frequency entering the room. I didn't even have to turn around to know she was there. Chloe looked like a ghost of her former self. Her clothing was slightly wrinkled. Her hair lacked its typical sharp style, and her eyes were hollow and red-rimmed. She moved through the crowd with a desperate, frantic energy, her gaze instantly locking onto me like a heat-seeking missile. She walked directly up to us, completely disregarding Sarah. Mark, she whispered, her voice strained. Please, we need to talk. I turned slowly. My expression was perfectly neutral, the same polite mask I would use with a stranger. Chloe, I didn't realize you were attending. Her composure finally crumbled. A single tear escaped, cutting a path through her makeup. Please, she begged, her voice cracking with a raw, desperate agony I had never before heard. I lost everything. My career, my friends. I was so wrong. I was cruel and stupid, and I destroyed the best thing I ever had. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. It was the apology I had, in a different reality, yearned for. Now it was just noise. It held no power, no emotional weight over me whatsoever. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment, letting her hang suspended in the silence of her own despair. I appreciate you saying that, I said, my voice calm and perfectly even. For a terrifying second, a wild, pathetic flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. I continued, but the man who needed to hear that apology, the one you called too sensitive, he's gone. I paused, allowing the finality of those words to sink in completely. I am not sensitive to your words anymore, Chloe, in any sense of the word. The hope in her eyes was utterly crushed, replaced by a dawning, sickening comprehension. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was simply stating a fact. I had moved past her entire level of drama. Then came the masterstroke. I turned slightly to my left, towards Sarah, who had waited with a patient, curious calm. Sarah, I said, my voice warm and normal. This is Chloe. Chloe, this is my girlfriend, Sarah. Sarah offered a small, polite smile. Hello. It was the ultimate act of dismissal, the final upgrade. I wasn't merely rejecting her. I was demonstrating that I had so thoroughly relegated her to the past that I could now introduce her to my present with the casual grace of social indifference. The woman she had mocked and betrayed was standing next to a man who was happy, grounded, and love for the very depth of feeling she had ridiculed. I gently placed my hand on the small of Sarah's back. Shall we go look at the pieces in the next room? We turned and walked away. I did not look back. I didn't need to. I knew she was still standing there, completely and utterly devastated, left in the profound silence that was no longer my agonizing prison, but her permanent punishment. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. What do you think about the way Mark handled this? Share your thoughts in the comments below.